Revelation was a book which was written to help those who were going through a difficult situation until the end of the temple system, the old heavens and the earth, the old covenant system was finally completed, as Jesus said was going to happen within that generation. And it happened between AD 66 and 70. So it was written, the book of Revelation was not written later, as some people talk about. It was written while the temple was still standing. And it was written to help those who are going to go through those things that were shortly to take place. And therefore, all of it, and obviously it's highly symbolic, it's written in apocalyptical language, it's written with reference to Old Testament, the books of Daniel and Ezekiel and other books. And if you don't have an understanding of the symbolic nature of it, then you'll take it and you'll have all of the stuff that's been written from a futurist perspective, you know, the 666 mark of the beast and all of this stuff, you know, tribulation, and they tie it to so-called tribulation. Well, actually, that tribulation, as Jesus said, took place, was never going to happen again, and it will all be taken place in the generation that followed. Therefore, there is no tribulation like that as it described in Matthew 24. Luke describes the same thing in terms of armies surrounding Jerusalem. And the whole thing was to fulfill the end of the old system, the heavens and the earth coming to an end, which was the temple, representing the old covenant, which finally took place at that destruction. So Jesus gave them a generation in which they could turn and follow him and not be subject to what was going to go on in Jerusalem. That period was the end of days, the fulfillment, when the resurrection and the judgment would take place at the end of the old covenant age. So we're talking about a spiritual resurrection of the old covenant into the new. Nothing to do with individual resurrection. And you can read that in Daniel chapter 12, which links the destruction of the old with the beginning of the new. And Jesus said this is the birth pangs. Well, you don't have the birth being the end, you have the birth being the beginning. So the end of the old, where the kingdom would be preached into the whole world, was all about the end of the old, not the beginning, the end of the old and the beginning of the new. We're in the new covenant. Therefore, the fulfillment was what was described figuratively in Revelation 20 about, you know, that system in which the enemy could not stop what God was doing, but tried to. But it's very figurative language, and you've got all sorts of illustrative things in there which are not supposed to be taken literally. Nowhere else in the Bible does it talk about 1,000 years reign of Jesus. There is no mention of a millennium. All of that is a fanciful coming up with things, try to explain those things, when if you took it at literal face value that Revelation was to take place shortly, it's happened. Therefore, we don't need to be concerned with those things. Now, obviously, you know, you could write books about the whole thing, and people have written books from all sorts of different perspectives about Revelation and everything else. It's not something that we should be reading today in looking for the future. It is a history, and if you don't understand Jewish symbolism, apocalyptic language, you just won't understand it, and you'll come up with things that try and interpret it by the newspapers of the day. Hence, some of the things described within the, you know, the pouring out of judgment, the seals being broken and the trumpets being sounded and all of those type of things, you know, they come up with things like, oh, these are talking about intercontinental ballistic missiles, and these are talking about, you know, Scorpion helicopters and tanks and all this stuff. And it's just nonsense, you know, but it's sold millions and millions of books, and films have been done about it. Unfortunately, the simplest answer is that it's a book about the end of the old covenant. It was a book about the temple coming to an end. It's a book about what they were going through in the persecution that they were facing from Nero. Nero Caesar is 666 in the Hebrew language. It's 606 in Latin language. So if you read the early Latin versions of Revelation, you'll find it says 606, not 666. So you've got different perspectives on the same thing. Of course, they had to write in code. They wouldn't have been able to read the book of Revelation and talk about Nero Caesar. They would all have been probably carted off. But a lot of them were. You know, Nero Caesar burnt Christians as Roman candles. So he was a bad guy looking to enforce the Roman religious things and the Roman political system on the world, including Jerusalem and that Judaic people who were under Roman rule, of course. You know, so eventually there were a number of things, because Jesus warned of various things that were going to take place, wars, rumors of wars, all that sort of stuff, leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem, in which those things took place. And I think if you read the book itself, even the very first chapter, it says these things are shortly to take place, soon to take place, not 2,000-3,000 years later, soon to take place. And they did. If you enjoy these videos, would you please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help. Thank you very much.